Hi, this is Luka Doncic.
Can he get it away in time on the step back? He does! He hits! He hits! And the Mavericks have won the game! Luka Doncic with a 30-footer to win it at the horn!
And you're listening to the Mavs Step Back Podcast.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Mavs Step Back Podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Trigg. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and DallasBasketball.com colleague, Matt Galatzan. And today, we're going to go over a couple of different Mavs topics. But to start off, Matt, we're going to talk about the Mavs' big win over the Spurs. The Mavs have made every win about as stressful as possible this year. It was the same thing against the Spurs last night. Now, given the Spurs, the Spurs aren't a great team, but, they're better than the Toronto Raptors and the Houston Rockets. Any Greg Popovich coach team is going to play hard. And it took the Mavs, every second of that game to come away with that win. They won 109-108. And Luka wasn't the star in this one. It was Jalen Brunson, who's in a contract year. We can debate, whether or not his contract should have been set up the way it is right now. It shouldn't have been. But, it is what it is. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. And he's balling out right now. So it was his second consecutive start. And he was great. He had a team high 31 points, scored 13 of those points in the last 4 minutes and 9 seconds of that game. He completely took over. And Luka talked about, handing the keys over to him because he, you could see that Jalen was hot. He was hunting that mismatch against Doug McDermott. And they took full advantage of it. So that was great to see. Again, it was a little bit more stressful than what you'd like, especially given, the Mavs are 5-3. The 3 losses have been blowout losses, and the 5 wins have been grind out wins. So even though the Mavs are in good standings right now, it's been really stressful. But what's your initial takeaways from that win against the Spurs?
I think it's funny because was it the last episode we did? Maybe the one before. I was very adamant that Jalen Brunson is what he is, and he's not going to be a star or a starter and all this stuff. And of course, the very next opportunity he gets, he scores 31 points and is the hero of the game. You love to see it. Maybe it lends a little bit to the idea that Rick Carlisle kind of knew what he was doing with his 2-guard lineups, and playing Luka a little bit more off the ball here and letting Jalen kind of take control of things down the stretch was smart. I don't know if that was Luka's decision or J Kidd's decision or both, but it worked and he was very, very good. And you love to see it because, you what you don't want to see is Luka having to play the hero every single night, because then he's just going to wear himself out. So it's nice to see Brunson step up and be the hero. And it's also kind of concerning in the sense that you keep struggling with these bad teams, not bad teams, but not elite teams. And you'd like to see that change. But at the end of the day, a win is a win, and you move on to the next one and you try and figure out where you go from there. But it's 5-2 now. So
5-3.
5-3. Sorry.
Still
5-3 now. It's a winning record. And that's what counts. So,
yeah. And look, Brunson, I like the idea of him starting even when or if KP comes back. We'll get to that here in a second. But him starting is a big key, in my opinion, to the Mavs potentially retaining him if they don't get an extension done. Because, like I said, his contract situation, it's one of those weird things. And Bobby Marks tweeted this out earlier about how stupid, this contract setup was. And nobody would ever do this, to where you have a guy, a second-round pick in the 4th year of his contract, about to enter unrestricted free agency because there wasn't a what is the word I'm looking for? There wasn't a team option. It wasn't an official team option. So restricted free agency is out of the cards. And it's really dumb, because now you have a guy who is developed pretty nicely for you. he's a good player. I mean, he's not a star player, but he's, one of the most successful draft picks that the team has had in 2 decades. And now
he's the most successful, not named Luka.
And now you risk losing him. So it was a stupid setup on the contract. I hate it. If they're not going to extend him, or if they don't think they can extend him, then maybe you have to start looking at trade options as the trade deadline approaches. I think in early March this year, or late March, I can't remember, but because the max the Mavs could offer him right now in an extension without it going to unrestricted free agency is 4 years, $55 million. If he waits for free agency, he could potentially make a lot more than that. So, he's betting on himself, and the way he's playing right now, it seems like it's a pretty good bet. So I don't like it, but even if they do keep him and they play the waiting game and it's a risk and all that, having him on the team and then even going into the postseason potentially as a contract year player, at least for this season, that's going to be a good thing for the Mavs. So I'm interested in seeing how that works out.
I wonder who was responsible for coming up with that contract.
I mean, look,
or who signed off on it. I mean, I know it's probably the agent that dictated the terms or whatever, but who signed off on not giving them the team option? That's what I want to know.
I mean, everybody in the front office has a hand in it. And Mark Cuban has said himself, even during the Nico Harrison and Jason Kidd press conference, he has, final say over everything. So, I mean, obviously that has something to do with it, but my hunch is I think Donnie Nelson just put all of his cards into the Giannis 2021 free agency basket. Like I did with my pipe dream stuff, but I'm not an NBA general manager. But I think that's what he did. I mean, I think that was another thing where it's like, okay, we're not going to give him, an actual team option to where he could be a restricted free agent in 2021. Instead, it's just going to be one of those things where we can guarantee his contract or we don't. And then, it's an insignificant amount of money that he's making per year anyway. So I don't know why it just doesn't make sense, Matt. It's one of those things where they're just trying to, potentially save a couple $1 million here and there if they were going to get the chance to chase Giannis and it didn't work out. But in all reality, we've talked about this so many times, cap space is a myth. Like that you can create the space when that time comes. So it was just dumb. And it was just another example. It was one of the few things that has happened for the Mavs in the last 2 to 3 years that led to them having an overhaul in the front office, because there's been so many unforced errors. And now, even though Donnie is gone, even though Rick Carlisle is gone, Mark Cuban's still there. So you have to wonder how much freedom Nico Harrison is actually going to have. But, even if Nico Harrison and Jason Kidd do good from here on out, they're still suffering collateral damage from some of the stuff that happened the last few years. So it's really unfortunate.
Well, it kind of, in a sense, it's kind of like college football recruiting and the way college football works. When a coach takes over a new program, it probably takes 2 or 3 seasons to get, where you want to be and get your own system in place and your own guys in place, from the bottom of the roster to the top of the coaching staff to the equipment managers. I mean, everything needs to change when it's a new hierarchy. Now, the different dynamic here is that Mark Cuban is still the ultimate decision maker and has the final say on everything. So how much everything's going to change, I don't know, or how much freedom Nico Harrison has is probably zero. But I guess we'll have to see as time goes on, because there's a lot of different things that I'm sure we're going to talk about here in a little while or over the next, couple of weeks that could change the dynamic of the team. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah. And just going back to Brunson and him starting and everything, like I said, for the most part of this season, even though the Mavs have been successful and they're sitting at 5-3, and they're in the top half of the Western Conference standings. It's been a grind. I saw a lot of people use the word chore on the timeline last night during the game. It's just saying it's been a chore watching this team for 8 games. And that's a good way to put it. That's kind of how I feel. There's been bright spots for sure. There's stuff that gets you excited briefly, but for the most part, it really has been a grind. But the offense has looked better the last 2 games, I think, even though Luka still hasn't gotten his shooting touch. Dorian has just been awful from 3. He can't find a bucket. He could fall out of a boat and not hit water right now. He is so off. Reggie Bullock, he hasn't gotten it going yet. There's just so many guys that haven't gotten it going, and yet the offense has still looked a lot better in the last 2 games with Brunson inserted as a starter. And it goes back to the entire idea, we've talked about since the offseason of adding another, a secondary playmaker next to Luka in the starting lineup. And look what happens. You take some of the load off of him, and Brunson, to his credit, he has evolved a little bit in that area himself. And it's made a huge difference. So, I'm not shocked, but it has been a little bit more fun from an offensive perspective the last 2 games. They played the Miami Heat very, very well, who, in my opinion, that's the best team in the league so far this early season. They played them very well, but that offense was just too much for them to overcome. But they were getting pretty much anything they wanted against the Heat, and then they just had some shots that didn't fall. So,
well, I think that for one thing, it's shocking that, as people who watch the Mavericks a lot, we know what the Mavericks needed. Sorry, that was
Mavs cat appearance.
That was Mavs cat appearance. So yeah, anyway, but it's kind of shocking that, we don't always know. We're not as smart as Jason Kidd. We're not as smart as Nico Harrison. We may be as smart as Mark Cuban, but the fact of the matter is, well, in terms of basketball, it's kind of shocking that, hey, yeah, we knew what we were talking about. The Mavs needed a secondary ball handler, and that's exactly what they needed. It's fortunate that they have Jalen in that role right now in the starting lineup. What hurts is probably the bench and the secondary lineup, and that could all get ironed out later, and they make a couple moves here or there or whatever. But it's offense. At the beginning of the season, it's always going to be rocky, right? So especially when you're implementing a new system, it's going to take some time for people to get in the flow of things and for people to get used to playing together and get used to the new system and all that stuff. And eventually shots are going to start falling, especially for guys like Luka, Reggie Bullock, who are, they know how to score the ball. They didn't just all of a sudden forget how to score overnight. So once you take that into account, and even guys like Sterling Brown, he'll probably get better. Everyone down the line, it'll get better. It's 7 games into the season, 8 games into the season. Those things will all come. I'm not worried about that part. The part that concerns me is that what happens when KP comes back. Do they shift back to the Jalen Brunson to the bench role? Do they go back to Dwight Powell starting next to KP? Those things are more concerning to me than anything else.
Well, and I've said it for weeks, and well, at least until these last 2 games, that my ideal starting 5, I'd like to have Luka, Tim Hardaway Jr., Reggie Bullock, Dorian Finney-Smith, and KP. I think that's your ideal. I thought that was your ideal starting 5. After these last 2 games, and given how Reggie Bullock continues to struggle a little bit, he's had 1 really good game, and then the rest is just So, if he continues to struggle, and given how well Jalen Brunson has played, I'm thinking your ideal starting 5 now is Luka, Jalen, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian, and KP. And this, we can kind of transition into our next topic, because of that. Because, the Mavs, they're going to be the best version of themselves if KP is healthy and actually playing. And that's a big question mark right now, because KP only played in the first 3 games of the season, and now he's been out for the last 5. And the next game isn't until Saturday, when they play the Boston Celtics at home. And Jason Kidd is saying, hopefully he can play on Saturday. And I mean, Matt, I'm already concerned because he's missed 5 games for what the team is calling back tightness. And that very well may be the case. I'm not saying that they're lying to us, but all I'm saying is the last time KP had a significant injury, it was game 1 against the Clippers in the bubble. And they called it knee soreness for a week and a half. For a week and a half, that's all they told us, knee soreness. And we knew after he missed, multiple games in that series, it's like, okay, something else is going on. And sure enough, a week and a half later, they announced that KP had a torn meniscus. So hopefully it's not something that serious. It's just hard for me to believe that a guy has missed this much time so early in the season just because of some back tightness. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty down on it. I'm hoping for the best. I'm not saying it's going to be something that significant, but the vibes are not immaculate right now with that, Matt. I'm not believing as much, so
I need to get one of those. Yeah. Well, when you have a guy with a history or injury history, like KP, you're automatically going to be pessimistic. There's no getting around it. You're used to him having significant injuries that'll keep him out for significant periods of time. And that's unfortunate. And you're also dealing with a franchise that has a history itself of not being upfront and clear about injuries. And that it seems, from what I can tell with this back soreness thing, back tightness, whatever they're calling it, that seems to be something that trickles down from the top from Cuban and not something that Rick Carlisle implemented, because now it's a new coaching staff. It's a new GM, and so it's still happening. So it's probably Cuban. We're not sitting here trying to make conspiracy theories about, KP actually has a slip disc in his back and he's going to be out for, the rest, 2 years, whatever, we're not sitting here saying it's something super serious. But it is concerning that they won't get more clear, because what does back tightness actually mean?
And look, I've seen some people say that, well, maybe it's KP's camp that doesn't want that information getting out and everything. And I mean, that would make sense if we didn't have previous examples of the Mavs doing this. Because remember Seth Curry's first stint with the Mavs?
That's what I was going to say. It's like they do it with all of their players. It's not just KP. When it's something significant, and it seems to happen more when it's a starter than when it's a bench player, because like they've been more clear about Maxey.
That's what I'm saying. It's actual injuries with some of these guys. Like Maxey, they listed him as having a strained back. Sterling Brown, he had a strained calf or something and missed a couple games last week. Those are actual injuries being listed. With KP, it's just symptoms. It's not an actual injury. So I don't know. It's confusing. And it just makes you want to assume the worst given his history. So,
well, I have my own conspiracy theory about this whole thing. And while we're talking about conspiracy theories, hear me out. Maybe it's a lot easier to give Goran Dragic a DNP coach's decision because you're thinking about doing something with him, whether it's a trade or a buyout or whatever. You can't
like where this is going.
You can't do that with somebody like KP. So maybe this is all part of a thing where, and again, this is a conspiracy theory. This is like,
this isn't sourced. This isn't something
this is like,
we've heard.
What's that magazine that has like all this celebrity gossip in it?
People's or something.
National Enquirer. This is like National Enquirer level stuff here. But maybe they're holding KP out because they're trying to work out a trade with Toronto where they'll bring back like Dragic and Siakam or something like that. And Toronto doesn't want anything to happen to KP injury wise. So they're like, hey, while we negotiate this thing, why don't we hold out KP just in case anything happens? And then, we'll hold out Dragic since he's old and also a little bit injury prone. And, we'll try and work something out. That's my conspiracy theory, but it's obviously very outlandish and just me being very hopeful because I've been waiting for the Dragic thing to happen for 4 years and I'm starting to go insane.
Well, I don't think it's insignificant that he hasn't played in the last 5 games, I believe.
Yeah, this will be his. I think last night was his 5th game that he's missed.
So, and Siakam, he's recovering from an injury. He hasn't played for Toronto yet this season either. So, I mean, I can see it. There would have to be, more moving pieces than that because,
obviously,
I personally think Siakam's a lot better.
Dwight Powell's a Canadian.
Right now. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
And the money, look, if you had like KP, Dwight Powell, and say you include Josh Green, who is like literally the only young prospect on the roster that's not a two-way guy, at least who they drafted. So he's a project. So say you do something like KP, Dwight Powell, Josh Green, add pick compensation, pick swaps, whatever you want to do to try and make this fair for both sides, because there was some tension between Toronto and Pascal Siakam last season. If I recall correctly, him and Nick Nurse kind of butted heads a little bit. And he even got fined for like conduct detrimental to the team. Don't quote me on that. I don't know if that's exactly what it was, but I think he did end up getting fined or punished for something he did last year to that effect. So that relationship isn't like rock solid right now, even though he's helped them win a championship when Kawhi Leonard was there. And maybe, like I said, maybe you can work something out where, you're basically getting Pascal Siakam and Goran Dragic back, because all players in that potential deal I just mentioned, aside from Dwight Powell, are not playing basketball right now. So I'm hoping it. And I mean, to Dwight Powell's credit, he had a pretty good game last night too, especially at the beginning. But that had something to do with Jakob Poeltl for the Spurs not being there, because he's like a versus Mavs all-star every time he plays the Mavs now, and he dominated in last week's game when they played. So I like where your head's at, Matt. It's
pulling out my inner Dalton.
Yeah, I've tried to hold back on like wild, and that's not really a wild trade scenario in my opinion. I think that's something that could potentially get worked out, especially if KP isn't truly injured the way we fear.
Yeah, well, the other thing is,
if he has like a cracked vertebra or something, I mean that then you're kind of just stuck. You're definitely not trading him then. So
the other thing is, Toronto's in the middle of a rebuild, and they're I mean, that's why they want to move Dragic in the first place, is because they don't want an old guy taking up that much money. Whereas
they've been winning since he hasn't been playing, and we mentioned, me and you have talked about it, behind the curtain, so to speak. But I don't think it's a case of Goran Dragic being washed. I think it's more of a case of he's playing uninspired basketball, because I mean, he's made it very well known where he wants to be, and they haven't done anything yet. So, I mean, I can't really blame him for how he's played.
But they're rebuilding, so it makes sense for them to take the old guy that makes a lot of money, the young guy that doesn't really want to be there either, it seems like, and is frustrated and wants a new start, and take some assets back the other way, get a draft pick, get a young player, get a guy who's with big money, who's sort of approaching the end of his deal a little bit more. Like, he's not
2023.
Yeah. So that's close. And by the time he hits the market as a free agent, you now have cap space, and you are hopefully far enough along in your rebuild where you can attract a free agent to Toronto with that money, or you can sign and trade with him, whatever you want to do. But it all of it just kind of fits in line together as something that would be a possibility and would make sense for both sides. Because the Mavs are, while Toronto's on a rebuild, the Mavs are trying to contend right now, and that's a move that you make if you are trying to contend right now. So I think it all makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I mean, if KP isn't hurt, and this is more just them being cautious, and maybe they're looking into, some trade stuff, because KP, he hasn't been great to start the season, even in those 3 games he's played. Now he's played hard. We've talked about this. We've been very pleased with his effort level, especially on the defensive end. But, he's another guy that has struggled shooting the ball a lot too this year. So, and it's only been 3 games, of course, but, you hate to see something like this come up on such short notice without hardly any other information about, what it might be. It's just this weird, eerie back tightness. And like I said, I'm already worried about it a pretty good bit, but if we get to Saturday, so the Mavs they played Wednesday night, so they have Thursday night off, they have Friday night off, they have all day Saturday, and then they play the Celtics Saturday night. If KP still isn't playing against the Celtics and misses his 6th straight game, I don't know, man. That's it's going to be one of those things that just keeps building and building with every game he misses until the Mavs have to just be like, okay, here's what's going on.
What's their record since he's been out of the lineup, by the way?
Let's see. They were 2-1 after he went out. So
now they're 5-3.
Yeah.
So they're 2-1 without him. What?
2-2.
No, that's not right.
2-2.
2-2.
Yeah. That's not right either. Why is our math so bad right now?
Wouldn't it be 3-2?
Yeah. Yeah.
Guys, it's been a week.
It has been a week for sure. Yeah. 3-2 with KP out. So, same.
So you wonder how long they can even keep that up without him in the lineup, because it took heroics from Jalen Brunson to beat the Spurs.
Look, that's another thing too, though. I feel like with the way KP wants to play, and they're always having to get him the ball in the post to keep him engaged and everything. I mean, I kind of feel like the offense, as clunky as it's been, they've been getting overall better looks, and the spacing's at least been a little bit better since he's been out. So, I mean, the shots aren't falling, but they're getting good looks, and the stats support that. So, I don't know. Everybody's been talking about the Mavs having a 3-point variance game, where it kind of regresses to the mean, so to speak. But I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but I keep waiting for the Mavs to have like a 20-point blowout over team. And hopefully that comes against the Celtics over the weekend. But
the Celtics are kind of a mess.
They are. If Mavs fans are unhappy with how this season has gone, even though, it kind of feels like the team is 1-7 or 2-6, but they're actually 5-3. Look at how the Celtics season has gone. Look at how the Hawks season has gone since that opening night blowout over the Mavs. They're not playing very well this year either. It's very frustrating on their end of things too. So, I mean, it's one of those things where there's a lot of teams just not playing that well. And like I said, the Miami Heat, they're really the only team, and maybe the Utah Jazz, they're really the only teams that have stuck out to me. And the Warriors, I was down on them. I didn't think they would be as good as they are right now, especially without Clay, but they've gotten off to an impressive start too. But
I mean, they have Steph, so
yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of basketball you give Steph, he's gonna keep hitting shots. But the last thing we're going to talk about here, and we'll get out of here, Matt, but Luka, he continues to struggle. He's still flirting with like a triple-double average. It's like 24 points, I believe, 24 points per game, 7 or 8 rebounds, 7 or 8 assists. So, typical Luka stuff there, but it's just not up to his standards, what we've seen the last couple of years. And now, given he hasn't started off this season as badly as he did last year, so I'm not worried about it. It's just taking him some time to adjust. And I have a couple of reasons that I think, could be why he's struggling. And I want to get your take on it, because we talked about how him playing in the Olympics this offseason could have him potentially in better shape going into this year. But, one reason, what if he's just tired? What if he's played so much basketball, even with the time off after that, and, you're jumping into this new season, have a new head coach, you have a new system where he's basically trying to learn how to play more off the ball on the fly. Something he's not used to doing. He has the ball in his hands all the time. But, if they get to the playoffs and you don't want him to wear down and you want him to have ultimate confidence in his teammates and give other guys confidence that they can do stuff, now is the time to be experimenting with that. So he's having to play more off the ball. He's trying hard on defense every single night. So that's probably taking out some effort. Taking out some physical exhaustion on the offensive end. And then you have the ball situation where they switch from Spalding to Wilson. And I know, look, I get it. I'm not trying to make an excuse for him. I'm just saying
when the other stuff makes a lot more sense.
These players are so, how would you say it? Anal retentive.
Well, okay. I made fun of you. I made fun of you just now for that, but it in a sense it does it I can see how it would make a little bit of sense, at least, because it's like, think about it. So
it's a different texture.
Well, yeah, so a lot of people listening to this aren't professional athletes. So it's like, I have a couple of different analogies here. Like, for one, for the older crowd, it's like moving from an SUV into a sedan or something like that. Like, the car just feels different. You feel different the way you sit in it. It looks a little bit different. So that takes some getting used to. And for the younger crowd,
going from an iPhone to an Android.
Yeah, or like even simpler analogy is, it's like switching from an Xbox controller to a PlayStation controller. Like, it's the same thing, but it feels a little different, and your fingers are your hands are a little bit different. The texture, like, you just feel different, and it's harder to get used to that. You can do it. It just takes some time. So, like, I can see how that, if the leather is different, even if the stippling is different, maybe the ball moves a little bit differently in the air, all that kind of stuff. But I think realistically, the other stuff you talked about is more of a contributing factor. Like, yeah, he's probably a little bit tired. We talked a lot about the Olympic stuff going into the season, about how he was just going to be able to hit the ground running. Maybe we overestimated that a little bit. He's basically been playing basketball nonstop for almost a year now. He had a little bit of a break in between the regular season and the Olympics, but he's not a robot. He needs some time off. So that could be a factor.
Especially when you're asked to do as much as he is on a nightly basis for his team.
Right.
Even though he's trying to, J-Kid's trying to get him to play more off ball right now. The fact of the matter is, one of the main reasons the Mavs offense has looked so clunky during these first 8 games is because they have been experimenting with that. He still has to have the ball in his hands a lot, for the Mavs offense to look, as smooth as possible. But when teams start doubling, when teams start, hand checking more and fouls aren't being called and all that, and Luka's getting frustrated, it just takes its toll. And, that's another reason I didn't mention, but I had thought about it before we got on here. The NBA changed the rule to where you can't really bait people into fouls. And Luka wasn't terrible about that. He did it every now and then, but, it's not just the baiting stuff that's not being called. It's, he's getting whacked on one end and it's not getting called. And then yet they're calling these BS moving screens every single time down on Dwight Powell or Boban. Shout out to Boban, by the way. It would be a crime if I went this entire podcast without mentioning Boban coming off the bench and scoring 17 points in 16, 17 minutes.
He's got a way of doing that, man. It's like, Boban is Boban, but every once in a while he comes in and he's just the freaking hero of the game.
He was awesome. And shout out to J-Kid too for his substitution pattern there, because when that game started to feel like they were losing momentum and it felt like the Spurs were going to kind of pull away at a certain point, he put Boban back in there to kind of stem the tide a little bit. So got to give credit where credit's due there. So but yeah, back to Luka. I just think it's just an adjustment period. I'm not worried about him. We saw it last year. He started out like the first month of the season shooting 9% from 3. It's not near that bad right now. It's at 24%, which is not good at all, but it's not what it was last year. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just going to be. I mean, how much evidence of this do we have? So this is his 4th year, so it's 4 years of the same thing. I think that's just the way it's going to be. He's going to start off. He's going to eat a bunch of sausage, drink a bunch of beer when he's not playing, and then he's going to start off the season slow, and then by the end of the season, he's going to be going ultra instinct mode, and
And then also, the first game of the season, they got blown out by the Hawks on the road. They bounced back with 2 wins, which they had a couple days in between those games, I believe. And then after that, these last 5 games all happened in like 7 or 8 days. So it's been a pretty
tired too.
They have played a lot of basketball over the last week. So, hopefully this break between now and Saturday when they play the Celtics, helps them out a bunch. And I think the more they get comfortable in the new system, the more guys get used to the new ball, especially with guys that are sharpshooters who, have a certain, not Steph Curry level sharpshooters, but I could see how that could affect guys like Reggie Bullock or Sterling Brown or, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian, all those guys. So maybe Dorian Finney-Smith can have another baby here pretty soon, and he'll start shooting 50% for the rest of the year. Because he was awesome when that happened.
I think bottom line is that we need some time for this thing to sort of get rolling before we make any sweeping assumptions about anybody on the roster, not named Dwight Powell, because we know Dwight Powell sucks. But anybody else?
Look, I'm not going to go that far, because you're going to have the DP truthers and the people that are like, oh, he's such a nice guy, and he is.
Come at me, bro.
They're going to come at, but I mean, he doesn't suck. He just shouldn't be a starter. He needs to come off the bench.
He should barely be in the NBA.
I wouldn't go that far.
Either way, we know what Dwight Powell is. Mostly everybody else is playing uncharacteristically weird right now.
It is
Luka's not playing well. Reggie Bullock isn't really hitting shots. Dorian's been kind of a non-factor. Like, all of these things are weird, and I think it's just because of the beginning of the season. It takes some time for things to mesh together. It's like what I said earlier. It just new system, new coaches, some new players, all this stuff. It's just going to take some time. So I would say let's revisit this conversation when it's 25 games into the season, maybe 25 games. And if these things are still happening, then maybe there's a little bit of concern. And
it's worth monitoring how the team continues to play without KP too, because if there's not a significant difference, if you're still winning at the same clip, whether he's playing or not, that makes him more expendable. I mean, if he's not going to end up playing over, back tightness and stuff like that, if it isn't something more serious, like I fear it is, then, it makes him more expendable, and it makes it more likely that they'll look for trade options. And that'll be on one of our next episodes. We've got a handful of trade ideas we're going to go through, and we're not telling each other what our trade ideas are, and we're just going to react to them as we call them out on one of the next pods. So that'll be a fun one. Idea. But all right, guys, look, that's going to do it for another episode of the Mavs Step Back Podcast. Be sure to go like, rate, and subscribe on all your favorite podcast platforms. I've posted on our Step Back Twitter account. It's at Step Back Mavs. There's a link. I think it's between now and the end of November. We're having a sale. We've got our regular podcast t-shirts, which we've been giving away. If you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts with your Twitter ad or Instagram ad, that gives you a chance to win one of those. If you want to just buy one, you can go buy one there. We've got these up too. This is the hoodie version. Ted Lasso / Mavs mashup. I got the t-shirt too, but I've been wearing the hoodie today since we had a cold front come through. So if you want to get one of those, there's all kinds of, there's shirts, hoodies, mugs, phone cases, whatever, laptop stickers, all kinds of stuff. So be sure to do that if you're a Mavs fan / Ted Lasso junkie like I am, and I know Matt is too. I can't wait for that next season to come out. But guys, we appreciate it. Y'all have a great rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you sometime over the weekend after we see what the Mavs do with the Celtics on Saturday night. Y'all have a good one.